अरे अभी नोट्स दे रहा हूँ मैं, सब दे रहा हूँ, अभी तो बना रहे हैं, अभी तो मैं साथ साथ होमवर्क दे रहा था कि वन ऑफ द होमवर्क इज दिस। ठीक है चलो आगे बढ़ते हैं, ये कर लिया हमने। ठीक है ओके चलो। Now let's try to add more stuff to it. So now this form that we have in front of us is the tier form. Okay, let's do one more thing here. Let's do one more thing here. Let's say, let's remove this br tag. Okay, so this is the tier form. This is the tier form which is going to create the tier first. Now we should have one more form. We should kind of like have one more form that should give us the items which will be later draggable and droppable, kind of like that. Okay, so there should be one more form. Okay, and you can see this should be the form for the item. Okay, this will be the item, and we are not going to give the item name. We are going to give the item image URL. We are going to give the item image URL, and with this, what will happen is we are going to create one more section. Right, we are going to create one more section, and we are going to call it as, let's say, tier section. Right, let's say ID is untier or non-tier section. Okay, non-tier section. Inside this non-tier section, let's say we are going to have a div. Inside this div, let's say we are going to have an image. Okay. Again, first of all, I'm creating a sample structure first, and later we will create this whole additions using this particular form altogether. Okay, and let's do one more thing between the two forms. I'll add an HR tag. Okay, and here also I will add an HR tag. Save it. There we go. Okay, later we can improve the UI. Now inside this image tag, let's take the image of, let's say, some Avenger. Let's say Captain America. Okay, so let's take this image, copy image address, and we'll say source. Save it. You can see this is the image coming up. Very big image. We don't want our images to be this big. Can I say that? So now we are going to style it. So I'll say class. I will say item container. And inside the styles, I'll say item container. Okay. First of all, we will give it a width of 200 pixels, height of 200 pixels. And I will say the image inside the item container is going to have the width and height 100% of the parent width. Save it. And this is there. I believe still it is too big. Let's make it 100 pixels. This is still too big. Maybe 75 pixels should be our way. Save it. Yeah, this should be the right size probably for the image. I'll say the object fit of the image should be cover. Right. Yeah, this can be there so that it doesn't expand out. Let's maybe make 95. Let's see how does that look. 75. Okay, so this is the image that we have. Now what do we want? Whenever somebody fills this form, these kind of images should be created. Okay, cool. So inside my HTML, you can see this is the form, and the ID of, let's say, this submit button should be, or again, now just to teach you more things, what we can technically do here is, now we were submitting this form by clicking of this button, and what was the event that we registered? We registered this submit button event. Now what you can do is, for the second form also, you can just change the ID to submit image. You can change the ID to submit image, and then you can use a similar kind of a structure. That is one thing. Okay. But there is one more way to achieve the same thing. Okay. Now, let's say we want to have a separate form which can add initial set of non-tier elements, which will be later dragged and dropped. Okay. Now we can repeat the whole process just like the previous form, or we can try a new approach also. So we'll try the new approach just to make sure that you will learn better. Now, every form also has an event. So let's say I will give this form an ID, and I will call it as image form. Okay. I'll say const image form is equals to document.get element by ID image form. Okay, we'll get the image form. And there is an event called as submit. Okay. On every form element, there's an event called as submit. When is this event triggered? This event is triggered when you try to submit the form. Okay, when you try to submit the form. So for example, first thing that we will do is event.prevent default, and I'll say console.log form submitted. Okay. If I save it and if I inspect, clear it out, and let's say if I click me, can you see form submitted is coming up? How cool is that? Right? You are able to technically get the form submission directly. Right? So either you can attach the event on the click of the button or on the submission of the form. Any one of the two approaches will absolutely end-to-end work fine. I just showed you to make sure that you have more context on it. Okay. So we'll talk about form submission event. Any form when submitted emits the submit event, which we can listen to and attach an event listener. Okay. So how the HTML is looking like? This is how form HTML is looking like. Okay. And the JS looks like this. Copy. Paste. Okay. So now we can technically get the form submitted altogether. Okay. Now what should happen in the form submitted? Right. If you technically see, for example, so there is something called as a form data object. This is again an internal class that is provided to us by the browser. Okay, it's an internal class provided to us by the browser. Let's try it out. So I'll say form data is equal to new form data, and let's say console.log form data. Now if you try to submit the form, Can you see the form data is coming as empty? The form data is currently coming as empty. Okay. Now let's take the image of Captain America, copy, paste it here, and click on it again. Can you see the form data is still coming as empty? Can you see the form data is still coming as empty? Right. Now, why is that? So now there are two ways in which you can get this image. There are two ways in which you can get this image. One way is you directly access this from the input, because this input also has an ID. So I can give the ID as image item, right? And this also has image item, right? So I can give the ID as image item and get the value of this input. Or you can access the form data. But generally, you access the form data when you are submitting the form to any server. If you're not submitting the form to a server, then this form data is not much of a use to us. So that's why we're not going to use it as of now, but I just wanted to still show you that there is some form data. We can manipulate it later to actually fetch the data on the server side as well. But for now, what we are going to do is we're going to say const image item input is equals to document.getElement by ID image item. This is the image item. And we can say const image URL is equals to image item input dot value console.log image URL. Console.log image URL. Save it. If I take the URL from here, copy, paste, click me. Can you see the URL is getting printed, and this is the image of Captain America altogether, right? So now we are able to fetch the URL image. If we are able to fetch the URL image, we can write one more function, create tier list item, and we'll give it an image URL altogether, right? So we can call a create tier list item and pass the image URL altogether. And the structure here is going to be similar. How? We need to have a div. Inside that div, we need to have an image, and the source attribute should be this. And then we need to attach that div inside our non-tier section. Let's do that. So const image div is equals to document.createElement div. Class list we will add as item container. Item container. Then we'll create an image, const img is equals to document.getElement by image. And we will say image.source. So every image has a source property inside which you can set the image URL. Okay. And then we can get this non-tier section. We can get this non-tier section. So const non-tier section is equals to document.getElement by ID non-tier section. And we can say, first of all, image div dot append child image. And here non-tier section dot append child image div. This is something that is going to happen. Okay, let's try it out. It's a very similar structure to the previous one. It's a very similar structure to the previous one. If now I add an image, if I click on click me, can you see one more image gets added? Click me, click me, click me. More images are being added. This is looking nice. And what we are going to do is, we should say once this has been submitted, image input item input dot value we should make as empty. And one more thing we should do, we should make the image display block. Okay, and we should make it a flex. So display flex, and we should give a gap of, let's say, 1 rem. Save it. Now let's try to add it. If I add the image, copy. 1 second. Okay, this is still going in a new row. Let's see why is that happening. Display block. This is image. This is item container. 1 second. Oh, my bad. My bad. We should say we do not need to make this as block. My bad. We do not need to make this as block. We will say the section, non-tier section, we'll say display flex. We don't need to have this here. We'll say gap as well. Save it. Now let's take the image again. Copy, refresh, paste, and you can see now the image is being attached in the same row. Okay. One last thing that we should technically do is, in case the value is empty, then we should raise an alert. Please enter a valid image URL. Okay, save it. If you try to directly click me, please enter a valid image URL. Please enter a valid image URL. And that's it. You can see very similar structure that we wanted to have. We have implemented it here using the create list item function. Okay. Now to create the tier list items, we have this function, create tier list item. And again, similar things it is doing, right? Let's move all of this. There we go. Right. So it is first of all creating an image div, that is the item container, which is something like this. Then it is creating an image, setting the source of the image, then appending the image inside the image div container. And then this whole container is being appended inside the non-tier section. What is the non-tier section? This is the non-tier section, right? And then this function is going to be called inside the form submission altogether. Now the above function creates the image item container and appends it to the non-tier section. We should call this function. We should call this function on form submission. Okay, so this is what we are going to have. This is the form submission logic, right? We're going to call this on form submission. There we go. Right. So on form submission, whenever this image form is going to be submitted, then we are going to call this particular function create tier list item altogether. Right. That's a pretty simple part, and it's very similar to what we already did. The only new concept that I showed you was instead of submit button click, we are doing all of this on the form submission altogether. We are doing this on the form submission altogether. डिलीट भी करेंगे क्रिश मैं दिखाऊंगा कि डिलीट कैसे कर सकते हो पहले आई वांट यू गाइस टू फाइट ऑन दैट ठीक है इसको भी पुश कर लेते हैं